Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On 22nd of May, 2010, when Captain Gluziga took control of Air India Express that was leaving Dubai for Mangalore, it was yet another flight that he was taking control of. First officer was Ahluwalia. Air India Express, that flight had just left, but gone from Mangalore to Dubai. Had a stopover of about an hour and a half, and now they're flying back early in the morning at 2:30. As soon as the flight took off, Captain Gluziga went off to sleep, which he's allowed to. And just 15 minutes before the flight was to land, he woke up. And air hostess asked him, "Sir, you'll have a coffee?" He said, "No." And as he took control of the flight, and the flight was about to land, just a minute before the flight was to land, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, there is a feedback from the cockpit, "We are far too high, let's do a go round." The first officer, Ahluwalia, is seeing this. 1, 2, 3 times. The third time he's almost shouting, "Sir, we are far too high, let's do a go round." Just a minute before Captain Gluziga was to land the plane, he had 7 warnings not to land his plane. But he landed that flight that early morning in Mangalore. In that process, killing himself and 159 other people. This is not the first time I have seen the rational man die. I have seen it several times in my career. In the world of advertising, I've launched a lot of brands. Reliance Infocom, possibly the most expensive launch in this country, I headed it. I launched the Deo category, Rexona Deo in 1995, Axe Deodorant in 1999, Kinetic Scooters, Morgan Stanley Mutual Fund. The brands itself I've launched in my first 17 years, I can talk about it, but you won't know much about it because they don't exist today, because they all failed. It's just not me who failed in the world of marketing. The failure rate of marketing, when I did my MBA 32 years back in a Jesuit institute like this, I was told it's 90%. Do you hear a figure which is any different today? I don't hear. 90% of the new products in marketing continue to fail. 70 to 90% of the change management programs across the world fail. Here we speak so much about digital marketing. In 1994, when digital advertising started, the click-through rate in banner advertising was 40%. In 2022, despite all the great things we have done in the great world of digital marketing, the click-through rate in 2022 is 0.35%. There has been 100 times more than 100 times more of reduction in the click-through rate in digital advertising. I know each of you have taken a Saturday to come and spend and listen to all of us and hear more about human behavior. Each of you will have a reason as to why you've come here and why you're attending this conference. But to me, attending a conference on human behavior is just for one reason. Because I really feel bad about the humongous failure rate when it comes to human behavior. Every other department of an organization, whether it's a production department, whether it's the supply chain department, whether it's the finance department, work at a Six Sigma level of success. But those departments of an organization or in the policy making that has to do with human behavior have a Six Sigma level of failure. But my biggest question to the academicians and to the corporate world is, do you really acknowledge it? Do you really say that if I'm in the business of trying to understand human behavior, I'm someone who fails 90% and more of the time? But somewhere in the mid-90s, I started my search to understand as to why there is this humongous failure rate when it comes to managing human behavior. And that's when I came across a very peculiar fact. Yes, all that we know about human behavior traditionally came from a field called classical economics, wherein we said man is a rational being. Good. And then we continued with the learning. But the first set of real, the study of human behavior happened somewhere in the late 19th century, early 20th century. One of the last fields of study in the world is human behavior. And that's when behaviorism by Skinner, psychoanalysis by Freud, William James, a whole lot of significant people came about. And the theories they brought about were the significant theories of human behavior in the 1920s and 1930s and 1940s. And in the 1950s, Noam Chomsky and others, a whole lot of people who by then had understood something called a computer, said we have figured out human behavior because human brain works very similar to the computer. And they developed the theory of cognitive science. Now what is so peculiar about it, all these? We as Raman Chandran, the head of neuroscience at San Diego University, said there are as many psychology theories as there are psychologists. But the bigger problem is none of these theories single-handedly can explain all aspects of human behavior. And the second facet of it is each theory, many of them are contrarian to each other. The very cognitive theory, science as a theory came in on by looking at behaviorism and saying everything that you do, like including learning language, is not from stimulus and response. And that's how cognitive science was established. But cognitive science had a fundamental problem, that they never took emotions into consideration while evaluating emotions. So, when we as practitioners or even academicians, we said we understand human behavior, we take stimulus and response from behaviorism, we take some conscious, non-conscious from psychoanalysis, we take some input, output, processing, something from cognitive science, we take the hierarchy of motivation from Maslow's theory. So we take all these and make one khichdi out and say, wow, I understand human behavior very well. But I realized we have a fundamental problem when it comes to understanding human behavior, which means human behavior does not have a single fundamental theory. Human behavior does not have one single fundamental theoretical foundation. And in my quest to look for that theoretical foundation, I came across this statement by Francis Crick, who himself created another fundamental perspective in biology. But he said, all that you are, your joys, your sorrows, your ambitions, your sense of identity, all that you are nothing but electrochemical reactions between your ears. That one statement said, hey, okay, it means all human thoughts, all human actions emanate from one part of my body, which is between my ears. So if I can understand the human brain, then possibly I can understand human behavior. I started that journey in the late 90s. And in that journey, as I'm moving, I still remember 2002, I read the newspaper every day, multiple of them. The Business Standard, there was an essay, the editorial essay, about the man who won the Nobel Prize that year, Daniel Kahneman, and he said, oh, brain takes shortcuts. Brain is not rational, it does not have the time nor the ability to process all the information, it takes shortcuts. and heuristics. I said, oh, that's interesting. Obviously, I read as much as possible I could get on that. I think 2002 by then I was offering a course in Exai in Bhubaneswar, a course on neuromarketing, because by then a lot of these I was learning, I was sort of, that's the academia practitioner, it's within me. It's a lot of it is I bring it in the academic work, and then I try to bring that into the practical world. And in 2007, yes, I co-founded FinalMile with a whole lot of these colleagues who are sitting in front of me. But as I went along, I realized heuristics, okay, it's very interesting. But then I came across the work of Gerd Gigerenzer from Max Planck, who is now a good friend of mine. And I realized, okay, now he's looking at these shortcuts that happen in the human brain in a very interesting way. And that is good, smart heuristics. But I know in the academic world, there is the whole nudge versus boost conflict between Gerd and Professor Taylor. But Professor Taylor heard about the work that FinalMile was doing in the early 2000s, and he used to invite me to Chicago booth several times to tell the kids that what the theory that we've developed is now being practiced to solve some of the most significant problems in the world. But every time I used to meet Professor Taylor, I used to tell him, Professor, I know you've done something brilliant, that's great, but that's not giving me the whole larger grip on the whole complex world called human behavior. And he always encouraged me, because I know academicians will always look at one area down there. And so I expanded my understanding. For example, Divya was one of the first people who studied something beyond. We all studied neuroscience and all from books, but she had done social cognition. But I think by then we started understanding that intelligence of a person, even as an individual, doesn't reside in the individual's brain alone. An embodied cognition, the dress that I wear, does affect my behavior. It extends on to things that I wear. Or it extends into all of you. Because the discussions, the intelligence is actually wider spread across social cognition. And that's when I realized that we need to learn more and more than just neuroscience, just to understand human behavior. But at the center of it is still the neuroscience, how the human brain functions. And as I was moving along, and I think interesting perspectives started emerging. But that is when I realized that if we want to understand something as complex as human behavior, it has to be a multidisciplinary approach. One science alone cannot solve a human behavior problem, because human behavior problem is so complex. And that's the first significant learning that I have, even for the future of when you talk about the world beyond the rational man, that the world that we're going to look at from a human behavior, this will be a multidisciplinary an approach. But the second big learning I picked up was that the learnings that neuroscience was bringing to the table was not incremental information. The first time I heard about it was when Gerald Altman of Harvard wrote that book, How Customers Think. And he said 95% of human processing do not happen at a conscious level. And our existing research methodologies like the focus groups and interview methods are only just scratching that 5%. And I got in touch with him in the early 2000s. By then he was retiring. He put me in touch with Steven Pinker. And we had lots of discussions around. But then I went deeper into that. Then I came across this outstanding paper by Zimmerman, which said, of the 11 million bits of processing our human brain has, of the 11 million bits of the processing our human brain has, 40 at eyes, 40 plus 30 plus 5 plus 1 plus 1, 77 bits alone are resides at a conscious level, which means 99.9999% of what we are happens at a non-conscious level. The position of your leg, the position of your tongue, the position of your hand, was it consciously thought through by you where you have put it? No. And when I have an information that says, until then, all my research methodologies, my communication strategies, all based on the belief that we are conscious and we know what we are doing. Now here when science comes and says, nothing, not even 1% of it is conscious, 99.99 is non-conscious. It's not incremental, it's paradigm shifting thoughts. And as I went deeper and deeper into the functioning of the human brain, and I realized that I have to really relearn my past. But the first thing I also realized, and that's a third learning that I have, and which is to me the future is, that when you have such a fundamental paradigm shifting knowledge emerging in front of you, the tools that you use cannot be the same. Even if it's behavioral economics and you're talking about heuristics and biases, which anyone would admit it happens mostly at a non-conscious level, you can't put one focus group where people are eating samosas and having a chai and discussing, this is the heuristics I have, this is the bias I have that bias. No, that bias I don't have. That research methodology is the way to understand heuristics and biases in people. Or the communication strategy of the good old 30-second commercial and, or the signages which said, drive slowly, danger ahead, do not cross the railway tracks. The good old conscious and then that's good enough. Is that the way to approach it? And I think at FinalMile we knew we have to rewrite the past. And in FinalMile we went on to develop a completely new approach to research called EthnoLab. And people who develop like we are here. But therein, we said it's fundamentally different from the research techniques that the world has ever seen. And is it just random? No. The world, the market research fraternity, in the Oscar of market research, which is the SOMAR Awards, we entered it only twice, 2015, 2016. Both times, the best case studies in the world was a FinalMile case study. 2015 was on voluntary male circumcision, a very personal issue. 2016, it was on girl trafficking. On the supply side, we studied the problem in 24 Parganas and in Warangal as to what sort of factors push a girl into flesh trade. And on the other side, on the demand side, and in Mumbai, we looked at why do men go for paid sex. And if you see the citation of the 2016 SOMAR award, they say, this technique is so powerful. It is able to get into such even one of the most personal of your behaviors, which is yours and my sexual behavior. And along with not just developing a new research methodology from scratch, we developed a new communication strategy, a design process called designing for the non-conscious. If 99.999 of our brain is processed at a non-conscious level, now we realize there's no point in speaking to the conscious mind. We need a way to actually speak to the non-conscious mind. But easier said than done. Because what you and I are based on the knowledge that we have. And I think what I was until then was all the knowledge that I picked up about human behavior from the world of advertising, which I've spent about almost 2 decades out there. But the more these new knowledge was coming in, I had to put up my hands and say, all that I knew about human behavior, all that I thought I knew about human behavior is fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. But I did it. And I said I have to learn anew. I burned my past. And I started a new life in FinalMile, in my journey to create a new understanding of human behavior. And that journey continues. At Fractal, about 5 years back, we said, yes, I think understanding of the existing behavior of human beings comes best from data, not just going 5 or 10 focus groups, but when you have millions of data points, I think that gives you the best understanding of it. And Fractal is the world leader of that. And why do people do what they did? Now that is something which a research technique like EthnoLab can provide. And how can we actually now change people's behavior? And that is the new communication strategies that we developed, I think was appropriate to do that. So we came together. In the last 5 years, I specifically have been trying to work in the area of trying to combine artificial intelligence and neuroscience. And I've taken specifically one point, the problem that I questioned of the click-through rate is so pathetic. I think just last year we published a paper on what is the time that people take to take a decision on e-commerce. And we realized that's 0.92 seconds. But where did that learning, a lot of that construct of the research come from? It came from the sports field. Because we realized some of the most interesting work on the brain processes are happening in the sports field. Because the decision-making time that is there when a bowler leaves, the ball leaves and reaches the batsman, it's just 0.44 seconds. The same is the time where US Open is there, from the server, the ball reaches the person on the other side in about 0.44 seconds. In soccer, when the goalkeeper is facing a penalty, the time taken is 0.44 seconds. But what happens in the brain in 0.44 seconds? Peter MacLeod of Oxford has done some amazing work. We stand on the shoulders of such academicians. And we said, we need to re-look at how e-commerce is being constructed. And just a month back, we published a paper at the ICLR conference. You know, this is one of the most outstanding conferences in the world on something called micro-stimuli, which we said if we're looking at smartphone as the key medium of the future, we looked at it and said, what is the interaction time? That's a primary research we did. And we realized 90 percentile of the time, my interaction with a smartphone screen is for 5 seconds. And 95 percentile, that's at 10 seconds. So the context duration that you have on the smartphone is just 5 to 10 seconds. Whereas on the television, that's about 5 to 21 minutes. And so a 30-second commercial fits in very well out there. But here, when your context duration is only 5 to 10 seconds, obviously what you need is a subset is where the persuasion stimuli duration should be. And we call it micro-stimuli. But when we looked at it, as I said, whether it's in sports or in nature, the mating game of birds and animals is what we learn a lot on. And there all the decisions are taken in milliseconds. And we're taking a lot of learnings from there to develop this new concept called the micro-stimuli, which is a fundamental construct which is very different from the good old 30-second commercials. It has been a very interesting journey that I have taken so far about trying to understand human behavior. As it began with my complete, that sort of shook me up, the sheer failures of the rational man and the traditional approach to human behavior. From that shake-up, yes, I approached it. But as I'm looking forward, I know the future is all about a multidisciplinary approach. It is all about creating new tools of research and new tools of communication like micro-stimuli. But it's all about a new burning the past. But more important, whether it's in the academia or in the corporate world, I think this new understanding of human behavior, I think Shankar Vedantam in his book, Hidden Brain, said this new understanding that has developed in the last 15, 20 years about human behavior constitutes a revolution no less intriguing, perhaps far more powerful than the discovery that the sun really does not go around the world, the earth. Yes, so far we had a universe of human behavior. At the center of it, you had the conscious, rational man. But the last 15, 20 years, the very universe has been rewritten the way Galileo did it. At the center of it is what we see is a predominantly non-conscious, emotional center. And those of us who are willing to accept that, and in that process burn the past, accept new things, create new tools to understand this non-conscious and the emotional facet of human behavior, the future will definitely belong to them. But to those of you who are planning to enter into this world, I can tell you, and a whole lot of people who've walked this journey with me in the last so many years will also tell you, this is an amazing journey. There is no dull moment. They all read hundreds and hundreds of books and hundreds of articles on human behavior, because I can tell you, it's a beautiful journey. And I hope there is a life far beyond, there's a clear beyond the rational man. May all of you walk that path. Thank you. We have few more minutes for just the end of 30 seconds. So any questions? Yeah, sure, please. We have a mic. Can I take the question? Can I? One question. Okay, fine. That's it.
Your passion was quite palpable, and you left us you left me at least wanting for more and more and more, right? So just on three things, I might be just asking for the moon, but see if you can indulge. On your ethnolabs, if there's one thing that you can say as in 60 seconds on what it is and...
Very contextual games are developed where people play games, where they take decisions and we only observe decisions. We don't ask people anything. We might do a hot state interview after the game is played, but we just put people in decision-making scenarios and we observe how they take decisions. That's what the research techniques are.
Okay. And yeah. Microstimuli.
I'm sorry?
Microstimuli, one example.
I think I know they're rushing. Microstimuli is, it's, as I said, our approach to developing persuasion stimuli that works in milliseconds. Some of the yellow lines and some of the work we've done in the past in FinalMile falls into that. But now we've taken that to CPG and housing loans and a whole lot of new things. I think the paper is actually there. The ICLR paper is available, but you definitely can refer to and you will get a feel. But you can always be in touch with me and we'd love to talk to you about it. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biju Dominic, for the energetic and informative talk. I invite Dr. Jimmer Roy to felicitate our speaker.